Hello, welcome to the ImAssuming podcast. This is Ija Mohan, and today I have, although I would like to call him a mentor, I think he would prefer a friend, Mr. Yong Kit San.
Hi, Ija. Thank you for having me today.
Kit, thanks for doing this. I think I would have preferred you to be one of the first guests because I think more than most, you're a lot. I wouldn't say harsher. I think you're a lot more unfiltered with your comments when it comes to.
So if you get shut down early, you know why. So it's better for me to come in a little bit later.
Well, in many ways, the podcast, or at least why it came about, is to kind of challenge assumptions, right? So you helping me to challenge assumptions, I guess on my personal capacity when it comes to work or even some relationship advice. I guess it's good to have a kid in your life.
It depends on whether Nisha is listening in. Giving you advice on your relationship did not come out sounding very right.
Yeah, well, I think she has to catch up on the podcast, so we are still safe.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I think for me, the fascinating thing, especially when I talk to people, is kind of trying to reflect how we first connected, right? How our paths kind of intersected. And in the sense, it was through MGVD or Mother Goose, right?
I don't quite remember. I remember that nice startup then in Damansara Heights. Is that called Mother Goose?
Yeah, I think so. Oh, yeah, it was called the Nest or the Mother Goose. Actually, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how did you come across and end up coming there?
I think somebody reached out to me. Forgive me, I'm just very bad with names. I don't remember who it was. I remember the face, but not the name. And then somebody reached out to me about probably exploring mentoring or looking at some startups. I thought it's exciting. I've mentored startups before that, so I thought it's interesting. And when I actually went over, I think we talked about several possibilities. And I thought your venture was one of the more exciting ones. It was closest to a brick and mortar business, which I'm actually much more familiar with. And I thought that very interesting because for the longest time, I thought one of the best things that can happen to a very lazy consumer like me is to have a subscription wardrobe kind of thing that somebody will send me a shirt every 3 months so I don't have to think about what to buy.
Yeah, I was hoping there would be more kids along the way to make that business work. But I think one of the interesting things around that time was that getting someone to kind of come on board with no real vested interest, not you're unpaid. I think maybe I've bought a couple of coffees. You probably bought a lot more for me. And just as an well-wisher, advisor, or commentator is, I think, very important, especially if you're talking about somebody starting up a business or any kind of new venture.
That's what you were thinking. I was thinking that being part of that interesting venture early on would actually give me big returns when the venture makes it big, right? So
yeah.
So I think,
Man, I think that I would love to have that conversation.
There was a motive there.
But you have also dabbled with entrepreneurship yourself, right?
Yes. I was involved in quite a number of startups, mostly beginning in the 90s in PCs, networks, streaming business, e-learning. And
so, and how did you get into that? What were you doing before and what kind of led you into?
Oh, way earlier. I think when I finished school, I got a gig, so-called assembling PCs. And we made some money actually assembling PCs from scratch and selling them. Of course, this is late 80s, early 90s, and our idols then were quite different. Our idols then were like people like Michael Dell,
Wow.
who made a lot of money, become the youngest billionaire and all that. So we thought, hey, maybe making PCs is the right thing to do, and we actually made some money and lost our shit because I think our first venture made a lot of money, and then we had a big shipment in the Middle East, and then the Gulf War started. We never saw our shipment apparently.
So the ship sunk, or pirates took your loot, or
if I'm writing my memoir, I would like to think that, hey, there's some interesting stories like this behind. I heard from the insurance company more like, okay, I'll talk about insurance in a while, but then I heard what happened is that the captain practically just repainted the ship, changed the name, and stole all the goods. So it was a lot more less exciting.
wow.
Yeah. And being a little bit of a cowboys ourselves, then I think we weren't insured to the full. We were probably insured like 20% of the total worth, so we literally lost our shit.
Was that the first shipment going out for you guys, or you've done it before?
That was like probably 18 months after we made some money from our big first shipment. So we were actually making some money, and we were going pretty well. And then that was actually the biggest bet at that time. We actually put in a lot of our personal investments.
Wow. And if you don't mind me asking, how did you get around to your first shipment overseas? How does someone in Malaysia assembling PCs here export?
It was pretty easy back then. Easy in two ways. Number one, there was no social media, no internet.
No internet. So this was
This is like 1990. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if there was internet, you have been bombed by the Gulf War anyway. But there wasn't any internet at that time, so there were clear bulletins and clear forums where you buy and sell international trading. So I dabbled in shipments of T-shirts and stuff like that before that. So it was pretty easy once you list yourself, and PC was really new at that time.
So why was it that people were buying from Malaysia or from you?
I suppose people weren't that particular. There weren't that many options at that time. Most PC makers make and sell PCs that are branded. They won't sell OEM.
Okay.
So the biggest OEM makers at that time are actually, other than the Taiwanese, are actually the Singaporeans. I mean, a small setups, mom and pop shops that actually sells 200, 300 PCs at the same time.
Wow.
So these are basically...
So those are considered small mom and pop operations selling like in batches of like 200-300 pieces. Seems like mid-size now, no?
Well, it takes, I remember it takes a crew of 4 people with an electric screwdriver to be able to put together like 40 PCs in a night. And this is not a day job. This is like you go in 9 o'clock and then you get out of there by 3 o'clock in the morning. You can assemble 40. So 200 PCs is like 3 persons sort of job or a 4 nights thing. So yeah, it's a gig.
Okay. And okay, so when you say you lost the shirt off your back, oh, I'm getting a call. Never mind. I think I can ignore that one. So when you say you lost the shirt off your back, right? What does that mean in the sense that where did that leave you all when you found out the shipment? I guess you found out was when it didn't arrive, which was what, weeks after you shipped it out?
No. I think the war started, so there was a blockade.
Okay.
So that's when you scramble to look for your shipments, because all the shipments have to go through the canal, and then it goes through the Middle East. So when the war started, we were scrambling, just like every other trader, scrambling to find your ship and see whether it has crossed and it has gone out of the zone of danger and stuff like that. And that's when the insurance company gets involved, because they want to make sure that they don't lose their shirt trying to pay off insurance. So that's when you see that, hey, the shipment entered at one end, did not come out the other end. That's when the insurance company will start looking for, hey, did it get hijacked? Did it get bombed? Did it get whatever? And then you don't find anything. So basically you get blank for 3 months, not knowing what happened. Until possibly somebody tipped off somebody that a certain ship has entered a certain port somewhere that looks like this particular ship because they couldn't find background information. Everything was manual then, remember, this is not internet where you can check things. So this kind of news takes days and weeks before you receive them, and very little things you can do about it in terms of verifying stuff.
Okay. I actually saw a very interesting documentary. Well, I wouldn't say a full-on documentary, like a short, one of those Wise Walks documentaries on YouTube, which was talking about cargo ships that was trapped in the, is it the Panama Canal? No, it's not Panama Canal. It's like, what was it?
It is the Suez Canal.
Suez Canal, right? And they were literally trapped there for years because I think when the war kind of broke out, they wanted control of the canal, so they bombed the exits and blah blah and all that. So there were ships there with cargo, literally stuck for years while the conflict was being resolved, with the crew there, and you know, was maybe one of your ships is still there.
No, it doesn't. As far as I understand, it doesn't quite work. The canal itself is pretty safe. It's probably the Panama Canal and Suez Canal, probably the most heavily militarized and protected zones. The canal works with locks, and so when the ship goes in, it raises the water, it moves on. So the canal itself is very safe. But once you come out from the canal into the in between Saudi and Iran, I think that's where that Hormuz Straits gets what you call mined, and that's where your ship can. The captain makes a decision, perhaps not to move on, or they get boarded and then they get told or being asked to port at either one of the places. That's what usually happens. And then once you port, you probably get stuck, as far as I understand. But that's shipping, and that's a long time.
So when you say you kind of lost everything, right? What happened? How did
I didn't have much to lose, to be fair. So I was like a 20-year-old kid at the time and made some money, and you probably
so this was money that y'all had made over the years, which you put into this, or it was like debt or borrowed money? I mean,
both. I think I got into some serious debt at that time. I think all of us did. We got into some serious debt at that time, but then that's part and parcel of.
How did you get yourself out of that? To crawl out of debt at such a young age?
In hindsight, there was not so much anxiety. So I suppose that if I lose my job today, I'll probably be a lot more nervous than back then. I don't know. So I think in hindsight is, I mean, the worst case, you declare bankruptcy. There's nothing much people can do about it. I mean, I think you feel bad about it, but it's not the end of the world.
Okay.
Right. And we had a few ventures on at that time. So it wasn't, I had a day job at the time. So it wasn't that bad in terms of the impact when you are young. And you're just thinking this one of three things, it fails. So we had a financial backer. So and the relationship, the financial backer, fortunately for us at that point of time, was good enough that he's saying that, okay, that shit happens, and then we just have to see how we can get this back. Okay. And fortunately for us, our financial backer, or rather our financier at that point of time, was reasonably well off, and he was able to let us pay it off over a long period.
Okay. Oh, okay. So that was nice of him.
It is, and I think he remains somebody that a huge amount of respect for, very successful, and he always acted like a bit of a mentor to some of us.
Not, would you say that, because even in my current, I wouldn't say extensive, what minimum experience I've had with entrepreneurship and all that, there has been investors and well-wishers who come in as like angel investors who come in, who are actually shrewd businessmen, but also extremely forgiving and understanding at some point. It's not their status quo, but especially when I hit hard or there's a massive fuck up, right? And where I expect to be chewed out by them and given a earful, suddenly, they can come and say, it's okay, I understand, you did your best, okay, why don't you sort this out and pick yourself up and figure out what's next, lah. Which I did not expect at all. I thought I was just going to get nasty calls and emails and meetings.
Firstly, we are allowed to use the F word.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay. No, okay.
Actually, you don't use it so often, so it shouldn't be an issue for you.
yeah. Okay, anyway, I think in everybody's life, having the right role model, mentor come into at the right time is incredibly powerful. I was just talking to this morning that I think that I think life can be best described at best is opportunistic. Generally is random, and at worst is just tragic. So when opportunity strikes and you get a good mentor who's going to help you either way, whether it's just a word of good advice, whether it is money, and I think that makes a world of difference to how you are going to get out of it. Whether you make money or not in that particular venture, I think going from there and learning and having somebody like this actually is incredibly important. And I don't think that is how seed funding and venture funding or even private equity funding is made out to be in this day and age.
Okay.
Right. So in those days, there's no such thing as venture funding. So if somebody thinks that, hey, Ija, you're great, I'm going to fund or I'm going to invest, it's either I'm going to take 80% and you take 20%, or you work for me, or it's going to be, hey, Ija, take this money and see what you can do about it, right? So so I suppose if you go about the latter type of people, they are probably going to be exactly like you say. I mean, they do it as a form of encouragement and support. So I think the approach is very different from one that says, hey, I've got 100 million here and I expect a 20% returns in 5 years. I think that whole approach is very, very different.
But do you think that this let's say the style of investor, is it more common for them? Are there more kind, understanding investors, if you were to put a ratio to it? Or do you think most investors out there are pretty shrewd? I mean, there's no right or wrong. I mean, it's just the style of conducting business. But I just find it proportionately, especially the early part, non-institutional investors are forgiving. Oh, I don't know if they are forgiving only because they feel that you've kind of tried your best, or you have not deliberately sunk, their investment or so on.
I think.
I mean, sunk. I don't mean a pun on ship or anything like that.
I think it comes down to several things. Number one is how painful it is for the investor. Right, if your entire net worth is 20 million and you sunk 18 million to this, I think that person will come after you with whatever avenues they have. Secondly is whether that person, how much trust that person has in the management team. So for example, if I imagine I invested in WeWork, I really don't think I'll be happy about it. Okay. Right. So and I'm definitely not happy if he walks away with $2 billion. So I would probably chase after it. But if I truly believe and seen that the people have done their best and their best is a competent best, not an incompetent best. And secondly is that they have tried all avenues, and I think that is the second. I think the third one is whether there is a chance of any recovery, just like a bank going after a back loan. Why does a bank go after guarantor instead of the person? Because you're gonna not get anything out of the borrower. So there's no point, even if they break your leg, you're not gonna get anything out of it. So
I heard this. I was at a talk. I can't remember, probably a few years ago, and
But you're making me feel very old talking about the early 90s.
No, you mentioned the year. I did not mention a timeline. No, but I attended this talk, and there was investor. He was wealthy, but he also had like a institutionalized investing strategy, right? But he said something that I thought was very uncommon. I don't know whether he practices it, but what he said was that when he looks at investing, he actually looks out for uh, entrepreneurs or teams that have been trying for a long time to make something work, or even to the extent of having failed before and they are still trying and doing something else right. But his philosophy, or how he put it, was he feels like he will invest in these type of entrepreneurs and people because they deserve a break. They have been plugging at this for so long and they deserve a break. And that's why he looks at it. I find it hard to believe that philosophy on its own lah. I mean, because there should be other factors like he thinks it's a good idea or whatnot. It can't just simply be that, oh, this guy's been working so hard for so long and they need a break. Or, how do you look at it?
I think it is also different if you look at personal investors. It's my money out of my pocket versus I'm a institutional investor where I'm a manager. I collect a 4% fee and I've got, say, 100 million that I got many investors to put into my fund and I expected to give a certain threshold returns. So if it is my money, I think each individual with their own individual styles and what they look for. If it is institutional managers, high chance is they are looking for an exit. At the seed level, you're probably looking at one big break, 2 break evens, and 8 screwed ups that you can write off. So basically, you just need one big break.
Yeah.
So basically, and from that perspective, I think they will try very hard to look at what sort of combination of teams actually give the best returns. We're just talking about this morning. That by profession, we do psychometric tests. My company does psychometric tests, and we look a lot at personality compositions. And top teams have certain personality compositions. CEOs have certain personality compositions. Startups have certain personality compositions that, from a scientific point of view, gives a higher chance of performance of the company, a lagging performance of the company. So there's plenty of studies about that. I'll be surprised if the institutional investors don't look at that.
Okay.
But they actually don't. So surprisingly, I just don't think that many of these people are very
So you mentioned psychometric evaluation.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Psychometric evaluation is simplistically described as personality measures. It's a science in management psychology that looks at organizational psychology factors, including cognitive abilities, personality, and the entire study of what makes companies and people behave in a certain way in an organizational.
Okay, so I think my familiarity with psychological evaluation or personality tests, right, is I think I've done the Myers-Briggs personality.
I'm going to ruffle a lot of feathers here.
Okay,
so from an oxide point of view, that is.
Sorry, what do you say? From
organizational psychologist point of view, that is a bit of a toy.
Okay.
There are very little scientific evidence of its utility and effectiveness in use in organizational environment.
Okay. Yeah. No, but to be fair, I did that at some later days during college lah. Yeah. So, but the talk was about preparedness for work,
and that's where I get a bit concerned is that practitioners. I'm quite sure they try to do this to the best of their knowledge and abilities. However, I think that the science is out there, and a simple Google Scholar search would tell you what is the validity of a test, what is the reliability, what you can use it for, and you will find that the literature is pretty clear that it has to be, or most things will end up in a 5-factor model for validity in terms of how it works in organization, at least.
Okay.
So, firstly, personality should not be a type.
Okay.
You can't be extroverted or introverted. For
Okay.
example,
It's
you
a
are
scale.
more extroverted than me. I'm less introverted than somebody else, and so
Okay.
forth. So it's always a scale. It's never a type.
Mm.
And secondly, it needs to be normalized against the population. That means to say that yes, I'm probably a 80th percentile if you put me against a population of graduates, but probably I'm a 70th percentile if you put me against a population of senior managers in a certain dimension of the personality.
Okay. So in terms of, it's quite fascinating because I always tell myself it can't be as simple as doing a questionnaire like Myers-Briggs, right? Like a simple,
It can be. So it can be as simple, and there are really good scientifically validated tests that can be very short.
And you think people can't game it? Like, if going in, if a company wants to hire me or a headhunter is looking at me and he's giving me a test, would people be able to look at it and kind of try and game it so it looks favorable?
You can try. A well-designed questionnaire would have internal measures to actually look at whether, for example, there are two common measures. It's called social desirability.
Social desirability.
Yeah. So how do you answer the questionnaire in a way that looks like you're answering because you think I'm looking for a certain answer? That's called social desirability. So you're looking for something that is socially acceptable.
Okay.
Are you a filial child? Depends on who you ask, right? If you ask an American or a Dutch, probably they'll tell you no. But you ask an Asian, they're probably, even if they think they're no, they'll probably say yes. That's a socially desirable answer, right?
Okay.
And second, very common one is things like acquiescence. Is how positively.
Sorry, what's the word again?
Acquiescence.
Acquiescence.
Right. Don't ask me to spell it.
Okay. Okay.
But that just generally measures like how positive or how negative you answer overall. So some people will just, I'll take a 9 on everything or I'll take a 7 on everything, right?
Okay.
So because that seems like the right thing to do. Meaning to say that in simple terms, are you overly positive? So if you are, then from a questionnaire point of view, when we do the answers, is there a reason for us to recalibrate the answers, for example?
Okay.
So for example, let's talk about firstly, I'll just stop this right after this one other example. In organization, you do performance management. So performance management is always overly positive. Like if you have a 5-point scale, 3 being meeting expectations and 5 being spectacular.
Yeah.
The majority of managers will rate their team members as a 4. Right? It's not a safe. 3. It should be theoretically, you say it's a bell curve, it's a 3. It doesn't work that way, right?
Okay.
So it's a 4. But we also know for a fact, and that's to all the HR practitioners out there, stop calibrating your results on a bell curve, because it is not a bell curve. Performance is a power law curve, right? So it's a number of super spectacular people and 95% of very average people. But out of these 95% average people, probably 30% are rated a 4 out of 5. Because that's just how people rate things. It doesn't matter whether it's right thing or wrong.
So just to give a little bit of context, because I know you mentioned it to me before, but just to better understand it, right? So a bell curve basically says
it's a perfect distribution. It looks like a if you got a chart, then the highest point is right on a 5 from a 1 to 10.
Okay.
Right. So it's an equal distribution.
Okay. That means your superstars are a few and your really weak players are a few. Yeah. The majority is in the middle.
Yeah, and a power law curve is where you have very high at one end or the other, and it starts sloping down from there.
Okay, so what those two, what do they say, and how do they differ in the logic?
It differs in a sense is that if you are making shoes,
okay,
a distribution curve, a standard distribution curve works, because the majority of people would be, say, shoe size 9, and then at the two sides, the shoe size 15 and shoe size 6 for men are actually very rare.
Okay.
That's a bell curve, right?
Okay.
But let's say if you're making shoes in a land of giants,
okay,
right? So the majority of people is in a shoe size 15, and then very little people anywhere else. That's a power law curve.
Okay.
Right. So when you try to calibrate things using different curves, from a statistical point of view, you just end up screwing it if you're actually not doing it right and not understanding the context and not looking at the data properly.
So
and that's what people
okay.
like org sites do also. I mean, besides boring stuff like creating competency models and performance management models that are not being applied in practice. I don't know why, because most people go to school and they forget about it the moment they left. Is that you need to then use the right context to do certain things, and this is where a little bit of knowledge becomes very dangerous. A little bit of knowledge saying that, for example, performance management needs to be done in an organization and is operationalized as a performance appraisal.
Okay.
100 years of research has shown us that performance management systems as operationalized as a performance appraisal is ineffective at best, dysfunctional at worst. So, but nobody seems to be reading that kind of literature, even though it has been there for years and years. Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, would it be fair to say companies that are usually doing psychometric analysis on their team, and they are most probably looking at mid management, top management, or is it across the board?
So there are two places where psychometrics are popularly used. This is not saying that they are more effective, it's just popularly used. One is psychometric is very popularly used in terms of finding high performers. So if I'm going to hire, I've got 200 applicants. How do I decide on 20 or 10? Right? Okay. So one way is that if I were to look at personality as a measure, there are many other ways you can look at experience, you can look at many other things. But if I look at personality and cognitive abilities as a measure, we know for a fact that the science tells us that there are certain personality traits coupled with high cognitive abilities provides you with the highest chance of high work performance when you come on board.
Okay.
But this is where a little bit of knowledge we talked about becomes dangerous, that this only applies at early career.
Why? Because then
so
they
you
normalize...
think about it, the layman version, okay? What works is if you're smart and you have drive, compared to anything else, if all else being equal, if you're smart, you have drive, you're likely to be successful.
Okay.
Right? It makes sense, right? If you're smart with no drive, you're just the guy that's criticizing and thinking the whole world is stupid. If you have drive and not smart, you're just going to run around like a headless chicken.
Okay.
Right? So if you're smart and you have drive, you have high chance of success at early career.
Okay.
Smart allows you to learn and acquire knowledge, and drive allows you to get things done.
Okay.
But if you talk about hiring a senior manager, smarts become less of an importance because you have many other proxies to measure success already. Without those proxies, then being smart makes sense. But once you have those proxies in there and say, oh, we are looking at ability to manage people, as in stakeholders, problem solve, connect and communicate and stuff like that. So even though there is a measure for recruitment, it is a different measure on different levels and different job functions.
And when you mentioned that this is most applicable to high performance roles, high performing roles.
A lot of people hire wanting to get people on board who will likely deliver high performance. Right? Okay. That's what people like to use a psychometric assessment tool or any other tools for. Okay. You want to find a tool to say that, hey, I'm not hiring the most stupid guy, neither am I hiring the people that least drive or the least wrong match. Okay. So supposedly, if I want to hire an accountant or an auditor, right? So you want to have traits like attention to detail, ability to finish your task on time. So these are all personality traits that you say, okay, this is the profile I want, and I want to be sufficiently smart. And then this is then the criteria I use and matching. It is again not so much a threshold. Say if you're below this, I don't hire. But out of these 100 people, these 20 tends to demonstrate more than the other 80, and therefore I want to talk to these 20.
I think the question that I'm wondering is, does that mean that this would apply to anyone and everyone, or only roles where there's a performance aspect to it lah?
There is this will apply to anyone and everyone and all roles, just that different roles will require a different profile.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So I mean, back to example, if you're hiring an accountant or an auditor, you want the ability to look into details and all that. If you're hiring customer service people, you want the ability to engage, empathize, and communicate and problem solve. Right. So it applies to everyone, just that you're looking for different things in different people.
So talking about what organizations are looking for in candidates, right? And I think that there seems to be a lot of discussion on both sides of the table when it comes to hiring. I think I've even had this conversation a couple of times in the past podcasts and all that. With relation with, there's a general, I will call it an assumption and stereotype in the job market now, where they're saying the people or the graduates coming into the job market now are millennials, right?
Yeah, what? Sorry?
Millennials.
Millennials. Okay.
Yeah, I'm technically a millennial, so I it's a very broad
I'm
concept.
a millennial too, just that it's a wrong different millennium.
So what is your view? Although I do feel that you are not looking at fresh grads per se, but as a HR practitioner, dare I say, what is your view on, or your take on this assumption that it is, they are not ready for the workforce or they're not suited for the workforce?
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree not because it's a personal opinion, it's because I did quite a reasonable amount of work with our teams when I was in HR.
Okay.
Way before I got into this line. So I was in strategy HR, and we were in the multinational. We were able to do a lot of research. So let's say, for example, the simple thing that people talk about, that young people, millennials or whatever it is, tend to be less engaged. Research tells us no. They are very engaged. They care about what they do. The difference is, if they are not happy, or they don't see, or they don't feel the value alignment between what they believe in and what a company does, millennials are more likely to quit.
Okay.
As opposed to a Gen X or an older person who slightly stick around unhappy, versus a millennial who will likely happily quit.
Okay.
Then second assumption is that they don't work hard. Not true. We measured the hours, we measured the output, we measured millennials work as hard, if not harder, if and when they are engaged.
Okay.
Right. So a typical Gen X or older person has, let's say, a productivity of 60%, which is pretty good. I'm considering that 40%
How
of
do
the time
you measure 60%?
So you find that in millennials, the engaged ones would probably run 5-10 percentage points higher.
Okay.
But if a disengaged millennial will probably be dramatically lower before they quit.
Okay.
It just happens that if they quit, you can't measure them, right? So it's a flaw of measurement that you don't find. We measure a lot of millennials. So millennials are more likely to stay at home and not get a job compared to be unhappily employed.
Okay.
Right. So that's what we found, and this is probably a few years back, probably not the latest.
Okay.
So another assumption, very common assumption, is that the new generation of people, the young people, strawberry generation we talk about, right? I just thought about it. I realized that it's probably a very Asian person. I think it came up from the Taiwanese or something like that. So it's called a strawberry generation. Fragile young people who's got a lot of pride, gets hurt, cries, and go home and cry with the mom kind of.
Okay. So that kind of thing. I think I was wondering why the analogy to strawberries?
Because if it's too hot, the strawberry dies. If it's too cold, the strawberry dies. Too much insects, the strawberry dies.
And even in the perfect temperature, it could still.
So there's an assumption that young people are not resilient. I think the verdict is out. There is a general assumption that the resilience, if I take a very rational approach to it and say that, hey, compared to an older person who's going to be unhappily employed versus a young person who would be happily unemployed, I can rationalize and say, oh yeah, the young guys have no resilience.
It's a simplistic way of
it's a very simplistic way of saying that. But if you look at some of the young people and the kind of resilience they demonstrate is something they're passionate about, it's probably 3-4 times higher than a lot of jaded, disengaged old guys. However excited they are about their jobs, right? I mean, so I just think that there's a lot of sound bites out there which are neither supported by science nor research nor practical application. My take has always been that either you go back to what people has looked at in terms of research and journals on what things are, or you can conduct your internal research if you're a big company. And I work with a lot of large clients who actually do a lot of internal research, and I think they are fabulous research, right? I mean, I think that so a lot of these sound bites probably is just what it is, sound bites with
ultimately we don't have a choice, right? Because if you don't bring in new people, if you are not planning to bring in new people into the organization or accommodate the next generation of employees or team members, then your organization also cannot survive.
I think that's where my fellow practitioners in HR seems to not live up to expectations. I think number one is I really am less concerned as a practitioner. Let's say if I'm a head of talent, right? I'm less concerned with how long somebody is willing to stay. I mean, a common soundbite again is, you hire this guy, he's going to stay loyal for 10 years. Whereas hire a young guy, they're going to stay for 3 years, whatever. But to me, it doesn't matter.
But that's actually one of the biggest stereotypes. I wouldn't say assumption, because I would say stereotypes because even you take, if I take my wife as an example, right? She's been working with the company for 13 years, right? And she's been doing very well. I would consider her successful, even if she might not admit it. But that story of working for organization for 13 years and climbing the corporate ladder is not a very common story for, not just fresh grads. If I'm talking about even my own age bracket, for people in their 30s, usually that's not very common. Usually it is acceptable.
But Ija, I mean, there's a mathematical thing, right? If you are in your early 30s working for a company for 13 years, means you start working when you're 20 years old, and you don't start working 20 years old, so you never get that. Right?
No, but you see, like, even if I talk to people around our age group, and for them, you see, I think the stereotypes are different, right? So I think if you are of a previous generation, a Gen Y and whatnot, and then you say like, 3 years jump company, 4 years jump company, right? It's very erratic. But I've also talked to people who look at, man, these kids these days, 6 months they leave a company, right? 1 year they want to leave. They say, at least stay 3 years. There's some stability, you've learned something, and then you're moving on. So even that how long you stay in a company seems to be a sliding scale.
It is even a conversation that I don't want to get into when I'm running a regional operations, and also when
I think you need to be a bit closer to
So when I'm in say if I talk to my head of talent or recruitment, if I know that young people come in for 3 years. I take a different approach versus if I intend to have somebody stay with me for 10 years. If somebody is going to come to my company and work for 2 years, for example, I want you to hit the ground running.
Okay.
Perform. 2 years later or 18 months later, let's talk about a career. So if you come to an interview and say, hey, I'm here to learn, and I say, sorry, Ija, it's not a place for you, because if for 2 years I expect you to hit the ground running, right? So it's a different treatment and intervention versus to say that, hey, what can I do to make you stay 5 years? But no, I mean, so I think that it's, to me, I think it's focusing on an area of concern that you cannot do anything about. You cannot do anything about the fact that somebody wants to stay for a short time or a long time. What you can do something about from an organization point of view is how do you ensure that that period of time becomes highly effective and productive to you.
But would you be able to make a guess whether this candidate probably is going to be with us for 2 years or 5 years or 10 years?
Yes, and it depends on work track record. If this person's, for example, there are a few things you can do from a HR practitioner's perspective. One is you can look at the personality.
Okay.
If a personality of somebody who constantly look for change, right? In the 5-factor model, we call it open. I mean, it's actually classified under the openness part, right? It's somebody who's constantly looking for new experience and change. What we are then saying is, hey, this person is not someone necessarily looking for a new job every 2 years. This is somebody who is looking for a new experience every 18 months and 2 years. Can we do something about that? Can we give them a project? Can we give them a promotion? Can we get them excited about staying with us more than trying to do a grind or the same thing day in, day out for a year, 3 year, 4, he will leave or she will leave. Okay. Right? So that's number one. And I think from the other perspective is looking at previous work tenures. Why did somebody move from job to job, and not just moving from job to job in very different capacity. I'm a marketing consultant here. I become, UI expert next for 6 months. Then I become something else. It could mean several things. We don't know. But that's why during the selection process, we need to test, right? So, I mean, it could mean that the person does not know what they want. Okay. Therefore, the person can still leave if he or she comes into the company and still do not find what they want in 2 years' time, right? So there's nothing much you can do about it. They are on this journey of discovery. Right. So and the other possibility is that they are just so bad at things that they can't survive after 6 months, right? So that is also other thing. So there are other ways of testing and validating to ensure that why do they do that, and these are just two of the possible many different scenarios you can use to look at whether somebody's going to come into the state. Okay. So
I guess one of the I think most people will agree to this in the essence that if you ask an employer on why an employee is not performing, most probably employer will blame employee, not a good fit, and it's usually flaws that the employee needs to fix. But if you were to talk to an employee, usually they'll give you a list of whether it's the employer or office culture, work culture, right? So it always seems like each party is pushing the blame to the other party. Like I've also worked with a friend who, Slim, who, I don't know whether you have met Slim. I don't think you have met Slim.
Is he Slim?
His name is actually Muslim, which is I would say a nice traditional name, but he's too cool lah. So I guess he gets short to Slim. But yeah, he is Slim. Now that I think about it, he's kind of slim. No, but so he's a HR practitioner, and talking to him for me, especially when I was asking him advice regarding some of my employees and all, is very frustrating because he would always frame it as your fault, in the sense that as you're an employer, if you're hiring this person, you will have to do more, figure out how to motivate this person, get them to be effective in the team. And so even in certain cases where I am biased, so in my biased opinion, I would say oh, it's blatantly a bad employee, right? For example, he
No,
would
I
still go
think
back
I
to,
wouldn't even, Ija, I wouldn't even want to go into that conversation. Because
okay,
I think that the simple answer is both of them are correct.
okay,
Right. So there are instances where it's employees' fault, there are instances where they're employers' fault. Most of the time it's both their fault, right?
yeah.
And
It's a degree, okay.
it is an analogy is you asking me if people divorce, couples divorce, is it likely the husband's fault or the wife's fault? I think both of them have fault. So maybe the in-laws are involved as well. So I don't know.
No, but
So
actually, I'm asking not to point fingers. I'm actually
yeah.
asking to kind of understand how to broker some kind of understanding. So
No,
if
I
you're
think
supposed to
the
move
purpose
forward
is not
as
even
a,
that. I think the first step is to assess what is happening. And again, there are plenty of tools in the space. You can run an engagement survey, you can run focus groups and all that. And these are very simple, cheap ways of finding out. Let's say if you take a simple engagement survey in an organization, which we HR practitioners run a lot. If you run the 22 dimension or I don't know, a 30 dimension one, you'll find that a lot of people are happy with certain things and not happy with certain things. And different people in the different parts of the organizations are happy and unhappy about the different things. So let's say if I run for a bank, right? So a front counter person may be unhappy with the fact that supervisor pressures me to move on after 10 minutes with any client. Or the fact that the back room is so dangerous and dark, or walking to the office makes me feel scared, right? There are many other reasons, where both internal and external, that causes people to feel disengaged.
okay.
And if we can identify those and we can fix those, I think half the problem is solved. At least the actionable half of the problem is solved. The unactionable half of the problem, which is the fact that, oh, it's a wrong cultural fit, or whether the person didn't want this job, he was forced to come to the work by his mom, or whatever it is, those we can't do anything about, right? So, and I am an action-oriented guy, and I always think that let's not spend too much time finding or talking about it in a very intellectual academic way. Either we take action to find out what is exactly the problem and decide whether we want to do something about it or we don't, right? So I mean, if you want to talk, can we talk about the blue moon, or talk about the lakes, or something more exciting? This I mean, the fact that whether it is my fault, or I just think that is very, very moot point that we should not spend too much time talking about.
Like when you mentioned that there are tools at your disposal, like surveys and focus groups and all that, right? Does that mean that, say, smaller organizations, like just say if you are 10 people in your company, and probably they can't afford services,
if you have 10
like
people in a company and you don't know why people leave, you probably don't deserve to be the manager, right? So I think so that is very clearly whether it can still be the employee's fault. But the question is, if you have the boss, you have 10 people and you don't know, right, something is wrong with you. And I think that's also where I did some work for some of the startups, and I taught the big startups, right, who is very successful now. And I think that the best thing some of these CEOs and founders, or even if you looked at Google in the early days, is the best thing a leader can do is to know your own limits. I'm great at bringing a company. I have this founding CEO tell me, which I thought was mind-bogglingly humble of him. He ran a company from nothing to 500 million. And at 200 million, he quit. He didn't quit the company. He quit from a CEO and become a CTO. And his rationale to me is, I'm good at the hustling, the ambiguity, and all the fun stuff of trying to do things with no track record. I have no reference points, and I can build a company at 200 million. To build a company from 200 million to 500 million requires professional work, right? So basically, it's like what he's saying, that I'm good at first aid. I can stop bleeding, but I can't fix a bone. That's when I need the surgeons to come in. I need the proper guys. And I think that's incredibly humble of a leader to say that, hey, yes, most other leaders will tell me, hey, if I can build a company from nothing to 200 million, I can drive it to $2 billion. But that's not necessarily always true. Sometimes it's true, not always. And I think knowing your limits and knowing when to ask for help is probably one of the best things a lot of young people we talked about earlier can learn about. And it is also one of the best things that all people can learn about, right? Is I'm feeling disengaged about my job. Maybe I need some help. Right? I think the ability to do that is incredibly humble and incredibly powerful if everybody learns to do that.
I think one of the things that you've kind of tried to drum into my head early on was this idea that exactly what you said, right? That to kind of have a level of awareness whether you're the right fit for the job, number one, and where do you see yourself going? Like, do you see yourself growing this, like you said, all the way to the end, whether it's a multi-billion-dollar company, or do you think you can take it to X? And I must admit, I think the first few times you tried to plant that idea in my head, I didn't quite understand it, because in the sense that my assumption was, hey, this is my company, I'm starting it, and if this grows to 100 million or a billion, it's my company. I'll probably be CEO for life, or It took a while for me to kind of grasp the concept that what took you from an idea to getting investment to building the product, managing a 20-man team, probably might not be the same skill set that can take you from 20 to 200 people. It might be. You might have the capacity, but at the same time, don't make an assumption that naturally you can do it lah. Because
I think some of us are just predispositioned to starting things and not finishing it. Right, so that is also a very common psychology trait. A lot of us are good at starting things. A lot of us are very good at process improvements, while others are very good at continuing things. And a lot of entrepreneurs by nature has a lot of curiosity. A lot of entrepreneurs by nature is good at starting things and doing 3-4 things at the same time. Right? If you are not somebody who enjoys the processes and the day-to-day management, the grind of facing daily problems and solving daily stuff, you will come to a point where either your company becomes very dysfunctional. Every day is this firefighting thing that nobody knows what you're doing. So, for example, there are many traits of a leader that people are willing to follow. But one of the most effective traits of an effective leader is predictability. It's not whether you're charming or whatever. It's predictable.
I remember you saying that.
You think about it. If I know where my leader is going, I know what he or she is likely to do in this or these situations, I'm able to then work with him, preempt him or her, and then and do what is necessary. But if today my leader does this facing the same problem versus tomorrow and the day after, all I do is sit there and wait for him to start, right? So that becomes very difficult. That's very common for strong leaders who are very, very intuitive, who did not manage to learn to put in proper playbooks or things that people can predict what to do.
Is that what they call having a culture of personality, where
yes and no. I mean, it's a culture of personality if the personality is effective. It's a culture of headless chicken if the personality is ineffective, right? So I think I think that is the important thing for us to recognize, is that there are different types of leaders, what you are. However, the second point, which is a strength of startup, people who are very good at startup.
Okay.
Not necessarily people who like to think they're good at startup, right? People who are actually very good at startup has a certain amount of resilience, actually a very high amount of resilience, right? And a high amount of self-efficacy. Meaning to say that I think I can conquer the world, and I can take the pressure and the challenge that is thrown at me.
Okay.
That's in simpler layman terms, right? So these two traits is highly required for you to push the company through its initial stages. These two traits causes you to be ineffective because you never admit the fact that I'm not good enough. Which is why I said earlier, to be able to push company from 0 to 200 million is these are the great traits, right? But to be able to say that, hey, these are not the same traits that's going to push a company from 200 million to 500 million. I think that's an incredible amount of humility to say that, hey, this is not right for me, right? I need to step down. I need to maybe watch somebody, have somebody mentor me, or have somebody do the job while I apprentice, and then maybe by the time it's 700 million, I can come back, and that's what exactly Google Boys did. And I think that's, I thought that is a great thing. And I don't think that, I think that a lot of startup today, in my humble opinion, but very strong opinion, is that it's probably meant by a lot of people who are doing it for the wrong reasons. I always say that, I mean, it's very simple, right? I mean, people tell me, oh, I want to be in control. I think that's the biggest bullshit. You boss. Are out of control when you are going a startup. I want to be my own boss. You are bullshit. Now you have one boss you cannot handle. Try to handle 20 bosses, which are all your customers, right? Or 200 bosses and your employees who probably don't turn up and you have to do everything yourself. So to be able to do a startup well, the reason to do a startup well can be many, but to having control, and then or some of these are really bad reasons. And I think I used to say this about academics, and I say this about a lot of startup people now. They are not entrepreneurs. They are corporate refugees. Corporate refugees. Okay, you don't make it. You don't make it in corporate. You're a refugee. Then you run to become an entrepreneur, thinking that is going to help you, right? So you're not bringing a lot of things that you learn from corporate to become an effective entrepreneur. You're running away from all the things that you fail as a corporate employee, and then thinking that with all this dysfunction and failures, you're going to make it as an entrepreneur. I think the chances of success is very low if you are doing it for that reason, right? It is different as an academic. So if I'm a corporate refugee and I say I cannot succeed in corporate because I cannot manage my boss, I cannot manage all the other things and multitasking, I can become an academic, and you can be incredibly successful as an academic because you can focus on one thing. You can be very good intellectually, very robust. You can do research. Yes, you can be a very, very successful academic. But if you fail in corporate, you are very likely to not succeed in entrepreneurship.
Actually, that's a very interesting observation. It's the first time I'm hearing corporate refugee. Did you coin that?
I like to think so.
Okay. No, in the sense that I've, if I can call it a philosophy, I think one of the things that I keep reminding myself is to never run away for something, but rather run towards something, right? In the sense that the end result might be the same, right? I want to, started a business selling T-shirts, right? As opposed to, I don't want to work in this office for my boss, and I want to get out of my office, so whatever, I'll sell T-shirts, right? At the end, you're still selling T-shirts. I mean, you're ending up selling T-shirts, but the motivation behind is vastly different. One is, I don't want to answer to my boss, so I'm just going to be my own boss, versus, you know what, I think I can do this. I have this idea. I want to sell this product. I want to sell this T-shirt, right? And I think that kind of applies to almost all facets of our life, in terms of try not to run away from something and run towards something.
Yes, and I just want to add one more on top of that is, however, people are different. So it's what energizes you. So certain people get energized running towards something. Certain people will never make that move until they feel immense amount of pain. It crosses a threshold, therefore they run away from something.
The carrot and the stick analogy. I mean, in the sense that some people respond to the
exactly.
Stick.
So some people respond to pain, kicking their ass so that they jump out. Some people respond to excitement, right? So it is two different things. And I think that, but back to that corporate thing, I do think that if you want to be an entrepreneur, one of the best things you should do is join a company early on. Just find a company to
related
join.
To what field your industry in?
You see, good companies or good organizations has many dysfunctions, to be fair.
Okay.
But it teaches a person several disciplines that is important. Number one, it teaches you to manage your communication.
Right.
So you think about a corporate, I want to do something, I need to do a presentation to my boss and do a presentation to the board and all those investment committee or whatever it is, right? So these things teaches you how to effectively communicate, articulate your ideas. If you cannot do that in a friendly environment called a company, you probably suffer more trying to articulate unfriendly investors who's either trying to squeeze you or invalidate you, or trying to convince somebody else like customers and all that. So I think corporate teaches you several disciplines. Number one is it teaches you the discipline. I mean, you need to turn up, you need to pull your weight, you need to be able to articulate, you need to be able to deal with people, including unsavory people that you don't like, right? So in corporate, there will be one or two guys that you love, one or two guys that you hate. You need to work with them effectively, regardless of whatever you feel about them. And these are things in a corporate environment that teaches somebody well, that will be extremely handy when you go out to become a startup. And that's when the corporate refugee comes in. So if you cannot manage this and you're trying to run away from such things like this, and then you're likely to suffer in the environment. And in corporate also, it teaches you, it gives you, I have another analogy, right? If you can't make money from somebody else's money, which you are paid for, right? Chances of you making money from your own money, from your own pocket, is actually very low, right? So if somebody pays you a fixed amount of salary every month and I give you all the resources of a corporate and you can't make it work, chances of you being successful with your own money or that is not necessarily very high.
No, actually, I've kind of had that conversation before. And so I'll give you two examples of that, right? Okay, now I'll give you one example. We save some time, right? Is the question of I think this was back in that MGVD, that startup house kind of deal, right? Where we had some of the interns and they were not motivated to work on some of the projects, right? So I was called in to kind of talk to these guys, and it was a bunch of young boys, and I was talking to them, why aren't you motivated? And did you come all the way here to Malaysia to work on this? These boys were from Europe, and then so their answer was, this is not my idea. This is your idea, right? And when I start my own company, I will have the motivation to do it. But this is not my company, right? And they were just like, that's it. That's what I think. Why should I work when it's not my company, right? And I think the example that I gave them at that point was that, you're talking about playing in the World Cup and scoring the winning goal and winning the World Cup. But before you even get the chance to play at the World Cup, you need to be able to show that you're good. You need to train. You need to show that you're good to even be able to be given that opportunity of, winning the World Cup, so to speak, right? So you're very focused on the end goal, which is, you know what? If I'm on the team, I'll score the goal and I'll win the World Cup. But this idea that, are you good enough to be on the team? Do you have the skill sets? Have you acquired the training to be on the team? Basically training lah. So the idea or the concept of you need to train in order to, which is usually we don't apply to corporate or we don't apply to working life. It's a very sports analogy, right? But I think even in entrepreneurship, there is a level of you can be better trained. I imagine even in my startup, in my merchandising startup, if I had even done a 6-month free unpaid internship with another merchandising company, the amount of learning that I had in the 6 months, I imagine would have reduced so much of my pain, and I probably would have spent less money and suffered less losses and maybe make new mistakes, but it would have helped me so much in my journey of starting my own company instead of trying to figure out and make all new mistakes on my own, right?
I totally agree with you. And there are some dysfunctional interns. Just like there are dysfunctional senior leaders and there are dysfunctional Gen X's, Gen Y's, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think you were unfortunate in meeting more than a fair share of them.
So here, let me give you an ending to that story, right? So this bunch of boys.
Yeah.
They're from Spain. They were not happy. So although my motivational speech worked for a few weeks, they still were not happy ultimately, and they left. Although they were not working with me, they kind of left the startup hub, right? So these guys, they went back to Spain. They started a sunglasses business out of China. We were talking about it here. They were telling me we should start here, blah, blah, blah. We were just talking about it casually. Nothing was done here. They went back. They started the company. They got investors in. And that company is a multi-million euro sunglasses company. And these boys are very successful.
Well, they could be. So there are outliers. There are always outliers. And I think it's just that, again, now we are talking about the bell curve, right? So basically, you say that the majority of people who needs to be successful needs to have that. What we are saying now is, among the outliers, people who don't show up, don't pull their weight, and expect to make it big when they actually become their own founders.
Right.
Yeah, there are. It's just probably instead of 1 in 5, it's probably 1 in 50.
Yeah.
And I think it's great for them. But then I would be very interested to see what answer they're going to give to their own interns who don't show up, don't pull their weight, and say that, hey, but it's not my business, right?
I quit.
Yeah. And the second thing, the second thing that I thought that we need to be also very clear is that the definition of success. I think the definition of success in your earlier podcast, I think you had with Daniel, I think that was spot on, is that I think the definition of success has become a bit skewed. Getting funding and valuation is not necessarily a definition of success, at least not in business.
Yeah.
So if your business is not going to be sustainable, it is a Ponzi scheme. Yeah. You're getting a more stupid person to come in and invest. To a point where they say, I can't pull out because my entire shirt and wardrobe is already in your business. I'm going to lose my shirt if I pull out, right? So that is a Ponzi scheme. That is not necessarily.
No, I mean, it is scary. Although it didn't happen to me personally, at one point, I was talking to so many VCs and trying to get funding, even from my own company. And suddenly you start hearing, when you're friendly enough and people have had sufficient drinks, you start hearing stories like, VCs kind of trading portfolios. That means if one VC says that, hey, you know what, I want to do the next round for this company, which is good. And the VC is like, okay, but then you must also come in with this company which is not doing so good. So if you want something that, it's a good company. And so you see, they're kind of horse trading only because for the sake of doing it, right? Like, I have this portfolio. So sometimes some duds on their portfolio is not necessarily good company, but because, look, I've invested, I want my valuation to go up, or at least I don't want my portfolio to look bad. So if you want this tasty, good company, you also need to put a little bit money here. So in a sense, I understand what you're saying, that it's weird that you are raising money for the sake of raising money and for this perception of valuation, but there's not necessarily actual fundamental business that's operational and scalable and hopefully profitable one day,
But you can't be still.
Sorry, you can't be
as a business. You cannot be not profitable in the foreseeable future. You have to be profitable. Whether foreseeable future is 10 years or 3 years, I think that's arguable.
Yeah,
but it has to be profitable because at some point you're going to run out of investors. Because you're selling hope, right? So basically you're saying that, okay, I'm going to give you a return. And then your valuation goes higher and higher and higher. And to some point, you're going to run out of fools to invest in the MLM, and MLM collapses, or your Ponzi scheme collapses.
No, but you see, there are sufficient outlier companies that have made it acceptable, like Instagram and Snapchat, right? Yes, they are outliers. They are literally 1 in a million. But these companies never had no real revenue plan. And even when Snapchat went for listing... I think
there's a different, Ija. I think that a company cannot be perpetually non-profitable.
These organizations...
an investor can. Right? So basically, you're saying difference is the founders made a hell lot of money, just like WeWork guy, made a hell lot of money exiting a screwed up that he's going to leave behind for the rest of the investors. But The
No, it's not.
company as a whole is still going to be
I
problematic.
wouldn't necessarily say it's a screw up because ultimately Facebook wanted the acquire blah blah blah, right?
But yeah, when they acquired their company itself is still a problem company until they figure out how to monetize it. Right? Until they figure out how to monetize it, the valuation is all hope. Basically, then I'm selling an unprofitable company to you, saying that if you really do this and this and this in 10 years' time, way after I've gone on a Caribbean holiday and forget about all this, no longer my problem, then you're going to be successful, right?
Yeah.
And when you buy, and there's a different reasons people buy that company. Right? But
No,
in this case, is they're buying not because of its business, you're buying it because of some other reason.
No, actually, Facebook, eventually had a very profitable, strong ad model.
Yes.
And they just wanted to inject that ad model into Instagram lah, and they wanted new users. This is hot. And Instagram now has sponsored posts, paid posts, and so on.
In other words, it's not necessarily, if you look at it from a company perspective, it was a white knight rescue.
Yeah.
It is a highly profitable white knight rescue, but it's not a profitable sale of a company. So the company continues to fail.
Yeah.
And then somebody sees that it's just like I'm building a house, brick and mortar. I'm building a condo, right?
Yeah.
Oh crap! I mean, comes 80% completion, I'm out of money.
Yeah.
I don't know how to sell this. Nothing is sold. And then another property company says, "Hey, I'm buying your company because I've got all these buyers queuing up and they want houses and I cannot build them fast enough, right?"
Right.
So basically, as a company, you are still a failure. You are being rescued by somebody who think that they can make something out of whatever you have done so far, which you could not.
Right.
And therefore, they put a value to it. So as your company at the point of sale is actually a failure, you are basically admitting that I give up. And then Ija take it off me and then pay me something, whatever that thing is, right? So from that sense, from a very clear business perspective, it is not necessary. And I think also that a lot of startups have that little idea that this is how to run business.
Yeah. No, because the stairway to heaven. Okay, maybe that's a bad analogy. The road to the promised land, right? It's
full of potholes to hell.
No, I think there's. You're right, but I think there's no VC or entrepreneur who wouldn't want to exchange places with Instagram lah. In the sense that the VCs made a big exit, the entrepreneurs became rich. So so if VCs now are saying it's okay to have a business plan where you don't know monetization, right? All you need to look at is valuation and exit.
No. All you need to look at is build value in a way that is valuable to other people, maybe not to you, right? Okay. So you're building value. And in those cases, they're building value by having just like in the early days, you measure by eyeballs, right? So the more eyeballs you have. So in this case, you're actually measuring by, say, I don't know, members, users, or whatever it is. And then you're selling that, right? Yeah. So basically, that's how it is. So I don't necessarily... it's not necessarily a bad
I agree
thing.
With you. I agree with you that even for me, it is very hard to wrap my mind around something that is not going to generate revenue or generate profits. Eventually, maybe it bleeds for a couple of years, but with no runway of any type of revenue or profitability, it's hard for me to kind of grasp. But the reality is that if I can use it liberally, is the Instagrams of the world have kind of made it okay for entrepreneurs to
but
not necessarily have a...
Again, we go back to the facts and the data. You're talking about 1 in 2,000.
Yeah, but you're using that as an example. Yeah. The thing is, even now, I think savvy investors know that those are the outliers, right? But they also know that there's maybe a 1% chance that their investment will go up. So I think there's a lot of wishful thinking, even on investors sometimes, where maybe this could be it.
I think investors are always probably the most mathematically savvy. They will continue to invest in likely breakthroughs or likely unicorns.
Okay.
With a mathematical model that for every dollar I put here, I need to put $10 elsewhere or some other thing. So at a certain point, once you hit the threshold, it's just going to snap and say no more. Right? So is that the mathematical model? They may not reveal what the mathematical model is.
Okay.
But that's how they operate.
Okay. So maybe okay, maybe wishful thinking was not the correct way of explaining. Would you agree if it was phrased that VCs see they invest in companies where they see a return lah, whether the return is an exit,
Yes.
most probably it's an exit, right? But an exit is not necessarily a favorable outcome for the business or the founders lah. Not necessarily,
Yeah.
right? So what a VC could necessarily want may not be what's best for the business or the founder lah. Not always, but
I think that is not just a VC versus founder conundrum. It is always a shareholder versus management conundrum. Right? So shareholders want.
So when you say management, you see founder as management?
Founders sometimes take a dual role.
Right.
They are both a shareholder and a manager, right?
Okay.
So if you are owner manager, if you are a family-owned business, you also take both roles.
Yeah.
So a family-owned business is probably the best analogy in the real brick-and-mortar world.
Okay.
So you have shareholders, you're a publicly listed company, and I'm the family-owned business. I control the business.
Okay.
There are some things that I need to do to reinvest so that my company becomes bigger and stronger. The 800-pound gorilla, if you use the old terms of in my industry. But my shareholder may want a different thing. My shareholder may want bigger returns today, not tomorrow or the day after, right? So, and you can see many public listed companies in this region, especially, they are family owned, that do a lot of irrational decisions that minority watchdogs think that is neither right nor of high integrity.
Right.
So, and that's where the problem is, right? So, and that's where they have this dilemma between me as a founder, shareholder, and CEO wanting to protect my investments versus me as a CEO wanting to do the best thing for my company.
And there's no right or wrong answer, lah. Is there?
I think history has always been the fairest judge. I mean,
if you don't evolve, don't improve.
Yes, if you don't evolve, you don't improve, then
and you don't control the government.
Not necessarily. Some people don't evolve and don't improve and still make a lot of money. So firstly, when you say if you use history as a lens of judge, you need to have again the context of what do you define as success. If you define success as an exit,
right,
it's a different story from you define success as a business versus if you define success as a change of phase from a growth phase to a maturity phase. Or you define success as profitability or whatever it is. So I think once you look at history, you look at a lot of some companies, for example, that were celebrated for its sustainability and good practices have begun to fail and unravel in the last few years. General Electric is one of them. I mean, you have Jack Welch and all that. And then you can see there are many articles recently about Immelt and gang, what they did over the last few years after Welch and all that. And they did things that were super for the shareholders, horrible for the business. And that's when they begin to suffer. Right? But then, if you again measure it by personal profits, I think for him it's great. It's no longer my problem, right? I exit. I made my money, I exit. It's no longer my problem. It's the next CEO's challenge. It's no longer my problem.
So in terms of maybe bringing it back to a fresh grad or someone, okay, let's not say a fresh grad. Fresh grad is somebody who's been working for 5 years, 3 years, right? And, and then they're considering going into, say, entrepreneurship or building a business. What would be your based on your experience, based on what you have read and what you have learned, what should be the things that they look at first and they kind of focus on when embarking on something as risky as entrepreneurship? Or don't do it?
No. I strongly encourage people to start a business at least once.
Okay.
I think for many people it's a very uplifting experience.
Okay.
Even if you fail.
Yeah.
I think it's very uplifting.
You can tell that my son is back by the amount of noise, which I'm pretty sure the mics are picking up.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, bear with me.
That is also a very important part, Ija, you actually point out. So let's step aside and look at the life career of an individual.
I think this, a bit
A
closer.
few points where you're under a lot of pressure as an individual is, of course, your first job.
Right.
It's important. Many people think getting married. We know for a guy and for a lady is different. For a guy, it's not getting married, it's having your first child. That's what we talk about. I would strongly encourage people not to start a business if you think you're going to have a first child within the first 3-4 years. So having a first child is a life-changing experience for a guy. And then again depends on your age, on your parents' age. If you're Asian, that when your folks get older, there is also big impact on people.
I think maybe there's something you can say about this, but I think there's a bigger impact for a woman. And I don't mean emotional impact. I think from a career perspective, a woman who is seen as single versus married and now with kids has very different career.
The data shows us that for a woman, it is getting married.
No, I'm
in terms of that, causes them to likely make a career change or a career decision. Whereas for a guy, it's your first child.
I'm not talking about the action on the employees, but I'm seeing as being perceived in the workforce, right? Or the assumptions or the stereotype. The being a single woman versus married with children.
Versus being single and quite old.
Single and old still favorable, ma. Like
no, a lot
no. In the sense, right? I'm just these are things that I heard. That I'm just
but these are
echoing.
stereotypes.
Stereotypes, yeah. These are not truths. These are stereotypes where first-time mom with a child is seen as she won't be effective at work anymore, won't be able to focus, and the reality is probably you have to pay more attention to your child. It applies to a dad or a mom, but I think in the workforce the perception on, at least from what I hear, so I don't know from your point of view, does that translate to HR departments and all that? But won't be up for promotion or won't be considered. It's not to say they're not being punished, but there's an assumption, a stereotype that their performance, they won't perform anymore because they're distracted, and so they tend to get passed for promotions and tend to they're not going to put in the hours to climb the corporate ladder. And again, it's a stereotype / assumption.
How do you
see this kind of?
I think there are likely practices like this, unwritten ones, of course, right? So I think there are people who look at this from that perspective.
Right.
Many bosses may. We can again reverse and say these are easy to spot if you look at hiring practices. Unwritten rule. I mean, pregnant, I don't want to hire, right? So because then after that, within first year, I have to take 2 months off. I have to pay for that and stuff like that.
Right.
So again, we are talking about stereotypical. Approaches. So yes, I think there are. I personally have not seen gender differences in terms of, say, pay, for example.
Okay.
I personally have not seen. I have seen more women saying that I need to take a step back, and therefore I'm willing to forego a promotion. If the promotion means that I have to travel, I have to do that because I've got a child coming on. I've seen a lot more than the manager telling that, hey, I'm not going to promote her because of certain things.
Right.
Yeah. So, but again, my HR experiences are in multinationals, so it may be different in different organizations. And in the few that I was involved in, they were quite equitable in the sense that the guy gets as much time off as the woman. So maybe that is an equitable factor, and therefore then it's not so bad, right? So I'm quite sure that in certain situations there will be differentiation.
Yeah.
Negative and dysfunctional differentiation. But I don't think anybody is going to talk about it. Nobody's going to say, hey,
I mean, I suppose the challenge is if there's two ways, or I wouldn't say there's many ways to look at it, or at least the two ways that I can consider it from. If I was to think as an employer and think in terms of merits, if person X, regardless, man or woman, is putting in X amount of work and giving Y amount of results, right? The output, right? If another employee is not meeting that, right, is not working as hard, putting in as much hours, whatnot, from a merit point of view, as an employer, I think it's fair to promote the person who has the higher output, lah. In that sense, from a
no. And in that sense, I would even say that from HR perspective, please don't do that. And it's not because we should be more equitable or less equitable. It's because that you need to be very clear. A promotion is for what? There is this comment saying that
let's not say promotion, like reward that kind of behavior, like whatever that is.
So whether it's promotion or reward is the same, right? So promotion is that you can promote a person to a level of ineffectiveness. Right?
Okay,
that's one.
Okay.
Right? Same thing with rewards, right? I mean, are we rewarding for past performance, or are we rewarding to incentivize future performance? Most of the time, it's a mix, to be fair.
Okay.
So you need to be very clear. So if I'm rewarding for past performance, in your example, is very clear. Right? If somebody puts in more, the impact is more, the result is more, provided that's the case, I'm not just putting more, right? The result is more. Yes, okay, we probably should reward this person more relative to a similarly packaged person who doesn't pull his or her weight.
Right.
From that perspective, yes. But life is never simple in that sense. I mean, the science itself is never simple. The science itself may not lend itself to easy to articulate and convince others, because there are also science data that tells us that differentiated rewards only incentivize future high performance for a period of less than 3 months. In other words, if you and I are both paid $1,000, if you give me a bonus of $500, I'm going to continue to perform at my peak for 3 months, and then I'm going to fall back to the same level as you. So what's the point then to incentivize for future performance?
Because you normalize. And
So and then my expectation goes up. The next 5 months, 6 months, I expect to get another $500. So in that sense, is that we need to be very clear on what we are rewarding for. And sometimes I think that we are very, very confused about those things. It doesn't matter what you practice, but we can still say that I'm very clear what we're waiting for. But in practice, I'm saying that, hey, I'm just tapping this guy's shoulder for doing a great job. I'm going to give them, regardless of whatever my practice is, right? But I think from the point of reward, we need to be very clear. So is this reward for past, or is this reward to push for future?
So if I were to ask you the second approach that I was saying, and it is a very subjective question lah. So it is, I don't expect you to give a hard and fast answer, right? In the sense that if I was looking at it from a humanistic, very philosophical approach, right? To move the human race forward, we need to procreate, right? And whether we like it or not, only one gender can carry the bare children lah. Like men, I think we would suck at it anyway, but we can't. We simply can't, right? But this is necessary to move humanity forward, whether we like it or not, right? So in a very humanistic approach, right, should companies or HR, and I don't know if some already are, right, look at this, and I'm pretty sure even feminists will hate me for saying that, right? But if a woman is bearing child or having a kid, right, where it's necessary for people to that, not mandatory, but it's necessary for people to procreate, have kids and whatnot, right? It is not fair to penalize them in any way. Obviously, I think no company will say it's fair to penalize. But is there how do I say? Can there be they get a leg up lah, or they get 2 points in their KPI as a handicap
for bearing?
No. So hear me out, right? I think if you're a woman and you're a man, it should be based on merit, right? But just say if you're bearing, whether you're married, not married, doesn't matter lah. But if you're bearing a child, you get like a little bit of a leg up to kind of like balance the scale in terms of.
3 observations, Ija. Number one is that you're making the assumption that you are comparing, your reward is done in comparative manner.
Say again, sorry.
Your reward is done in a comparative manner. You have a certain amount of incentive, for example, additional variation pay. And then I'm saying that I need to somehow decide who gets what in the team based on relative contribution. But that's hardly the case in most situations. In most practices, individuals with their individual expectations.
Right.
And what you try to do there is already catered for by having a different expectation for a woman versus a man.
How do you say?
Supposedly, if a man is expected to do 1.2 million as sales, you can perhaps say that because I expect you to be off work for 2 months, therefore your target is only 1 million. So from the individual KPI perspective, you can, or individual whatever expectations you want to call it, KPI, whatever it is, you can already manage that. So it's not a big deal. Yeah.
No, but also I get the feeling that there would also be outcry on some strawberry men, if I can say that, where, oh, this is being unfair. Why do women, just because she decides to have a kid, why does her targets are lower? So easy for her to cut target. No, there's
no, I think that's the first observation. So I'm just saying that it can be managed on an individual basis.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Okay, the second observation is that
companies doing that.
Yes.
Okay.
So most performance matrices are in practice individualized.
Right.
So maybe you have a variation of your pay that is based on group performance. That's a different story. Right?
Okay.
So secondly is there's a different treatment to this, and we see this in different countries.
Okay.
UK gives 6 months paid leave.
Okay.
Or something like that. You go to Scandinavian countries, sometimes you get 12 months paid leave. So we are saying that they are being rewarded in a differentiated way anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. You can think about it as, okay, you don't get a promotion, but you get paid to tend to your family.
Right.
And in some Scandinavian countries, that option is available to both the husband and the wife. Yeah. Right? So you say, if you think that it's not fair, then you take your 4 months off and take care of a kid. Right? Yeah. So in that sense, it's done. And the third one is go back to the science of, do women who take time off to bear a family or to take care of a family, do their performance deteriorate? That's number one. Second is, are their rewards unfair and being perceived as unfair? I can't answer the second question because I don't know. Yeah. The first question is quite clear that no, they don't. So despite the fact that you have a first child, whatever, that we know for a fact that statistics tells us, or research tells us that performance impact of women, whether they are having a child or not, are actually quite equitable. So if you're a laid back women employee, you continue to be a laid back women employee. If you're a hard hitting women employee, you continue to be a hard hitting employee, right? So regardless of you're going to take 2 months off or not, up to the point I've seen situations where women are so dedicated that they're water break in the office, and then they have to run to the hospital or call an ambulance, right? So I mean, so you are saying that for whatever time they remain at work, the impact remains the same.
Yeah. No, because I imagine that if you were to draw those kind of parallels, that a low performing male employee versus a high performing female childbearing employee, even if she's maybe spending 80% of the time, 20% less time at work, she'll probably be way more effective than the male.
Yes, different, that's
right? Because they are just at a different level of performance, right? But I think again, why I say it's subjective is because it's a perception, right? So if just say bad management looks at it and say like,
but hang on, I mean, bad management will always bad management. So we're not going to take that into consideration. But we know, like in countries where both parents are given an option, we very often see the men taking up the option almost as much as the woman.
Okay.
right? So we are saying then that you cannot differentiate them because half the time the man is the guy who says, I want to take time off. Then do the men also get that 2 extra points? I mean, then you say don't give points. So it's an unnecessary complexity that you want to build in.
Right.
And I think the other observation is in practice is my ex-boss has always told me something that I hold very close to my heart is, so if a system and process can manage everything, it's the day we lose our jobs, both as HR managers, as CEOs or COOs or board members, right? So the question is, the purpose is not to have a system to make all the decisions for us. The purpose is to have a system to offload us from things that we don't need to look at on a daily basis.
Okay.
Right. So, and then we manage the exceptions.
Right.
And this is what the entire thing we're talking about, probably the last 15 minutes, are what we call exceptions, right? So yes, how often do you have somebody getting pregnant in the office? In my company, where 70% of the people, I actually have a case. I heard of a case where somebody in UK, not my company, but then somebody in the UK was hired for 7 years. She worked all of like 4 months. She got pregnant, she got on leave, then comes back.
So these are like the horror stories or the extreme stereotypes that...
No, these are horror stories that happen in every single thing. And that's where, like my ex-boss says, these are exceptions that we need to manage, whether as CEOs or HR managers or whatever, or just line managers, where we need to manage this. Right? That's what we are paid for. Right? It's just like the earlier one about the horse trading in VC industry. So I've also heard, when I was in the early years managing sales teams, where you have a step, a ladder rate of commission. If you hit 100,000, you get a certain percentage. You hit 1 million, you get a certain percentage. Then you realize that
my son wants to join the conversation. He's behind you. I keep forgetting to lock the room. Come, Kyra. Sorry, I keep forgetting to lock the room. Babe, please help to lock. Sorry. Okay, I'll probably edit that out.
No, it's worth it. But
sorry, you were saying that in sales, where
in
there's
sales,
certain
then
tiers,
you realize that your top salespeople keeps getting rotated. Because if I'm 70% there and you have 30%, instead of each of us get less, why don't you put all your sales under me and we get more, and then I share with you, right? So some humans are by nature mischievous in that.
They want to game the system.
Yes, it's the same thing with the guy in the venture fund who has got one screwed up portfolio and then another great one, and I say, okay, to make me look good, you take this and I take this, right? So basically, I think human nature, and I think that's where if you try to have a perfect reward system, whether reward system is money or pay package or whatever it is, whether your industry is venture funds and your business investments, or you're a business leader or whatever it is, if you try to have a system that solves all the problems, I think you're probably more effective if you invest the time looking at things that matters. Very early on in my life, I read a business book, and so bad that I don't remember the name. And I'm so bad with memory. I think it's called the Asher Cycle and something like that.
The business book is not bad.
No, business book is great. Yeah. So it's very memorable. Is that you always look at everything you do and you put it into 4 columns, right? The things that you have to do because you have to do because it's compliance, you have to file your bloody taxes. I mean, it doesn't help your business at all.
Okay.
Then there are things that you have to do that doesn't help your business. But if you don't do, it's going to harm your business, the hygiene factors.
Okay.
Think about if you're a restaurant and your toilet is dirty. Right. So if you're having a clean toilet, doesn't get you more customers. It may in certain situations where everybody else has dirty toilets. Yes, it does help you, right? Yeah. And then there's a comparative things that you do better than other people. My food is tastier, my environment is better, my drinks are great, and there's a 4 column where you do things that are extraordinary that are gonna shoot through and hit the ball out of the fence.
Right.
The thing is, sometimes when we are in business, we spend too much time in the bottom left, which is the things that are hygiene factors and the compliance factors. If you're trying to do a business in Europe now, you probably have to hire a skeleton crew of 5 people
Mm.
just to make sure you're compliant. There's GDPR, there's legal, there's so many things
Right.
that they become, in a way, a little bit challenging for small businesses.
So it becomes a barrier of entry.
Exactly.
For,
So, but you spend so much time doing these things that doesn't help your business.
Yeah.
Whereas you should be thinking. So I sometimes think that trying to find a perfect system is a hygiene factor. Having a better system doesn't really help enable your business. But if you have a bad system, it screws your business. So you better put that in that hygiene factor and then spend more time thinking about what can I do to maybe create a wonderful environment that people want to come to work, regardless of the fact that I pay them less than other people, for example. Or I'm such an inspirational boss that people love working with me. Or we're working on such exciting stuff that people want to have this as part of their resume.
Right.
Those are easy wins. Right? Or you are like a Google where everybody thinks that regardless of whether it's true or not, thinks I want to go for Google, that's you're out of the ballpark side. So I think sometimes let's not spend too much time on a circle of concern. Let's spend more time in the circle of influence, what we can do. I always think that I'm an action-oriented person. People who work with me always have this clear idea of my approach. First, I always ask is, what do we know about the situation? Second, I ask is, my team always call it, I'm a bookends person, right? There's a bookend. What's the worst case scenario?
Right.
Can we live with it? If you can live with it, I can put an intern on $1 million account. Because I know that if the intern does well, we are going to celebrate. If the intern screws up, it's okay, right? So that's a bookend. Then of course, how good does it get? How big an impact does it go? So I think if you answer these 3 questions, you're happy with it, we take action. And we don't have to have the perfect answer of trying to. I remember listening to a speech by Colin Powell, the ex-Secretary of State, and then he was the Chief of Staff. Armed Forces. I think he always says that he tries to answer very quick few questions whenever somebody come up in the army. In the armed forces. And what do we know about the situations? What do we not know about the situation? What is a suggested action? What are the risks involved and what resources require? Right. So very simple. And I also heard about this almost meme story about this guy in a company. I shall not mention names, but it's a well-known company that somebody did a big presentation deck going to the management committee.
Okay.
I remember I was there, and the CEO looked at him and said, "Sorry, Frank, or whatever your name is, come back when you have one pitch." So the guy really struggled because he came from a company where he need to explain everything. What really hurt that guy a lot more was the fact that he felt that he missed an opportunity to demonstrate how smart he was by saying and telling and presenting to everybody all the things that he has studied and therefore come to this proposal.
Right.
And I reflected that to the CEO, and the CEO basically called him in and said that, Frank or whatever, well, his name is obviously not Frank, and we call him Frank, right? So the CEO called Frank, we hired you. That means you're smart enough. Stop proving to me that you're smart. Stop trying to prove to me that I was wrong, right, in hiring you because you're smart. Start proving to me that your smart is applicable to a way that's profitable for the company. So you're already smart enough coming on board. And therefore just apply that and tell us where we are going. And I think that's great. There's also some I don't know how true it is, there's this legend that everything that goes to Michael Dell is one page with 4 quadrants, right?
Oh, is it? Yeah.
So it's 4 quadrants. If you have to go up to him, it's very simple. Is what's the situation? What do you require? What are the risk? And what is your decision? Basically, then his answer is yes or no. Move on. Right. So I think sometimes it's some organizations, some media. I'm a great fan when I talk about management. I'm a great fan of Gary Hamel. Like few authors I remember. Hamel. Yeah.
Okay.
Hamel always look at organizations and say,
who is he? Sorry, I'm not.
He's just a professor in management from somewhere, I think.
Okay.
One of those universities. And he wrote a lot of books about how to simplify organizations.
Okay.
His management is because you have middle managers because the company has spread too wide. You need somebody to watch over somebody.
Okay.
But the people who watch over somebody does nothing more than alignment. If you can find a way to align, then the middle management has totally zero value.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the middle management actually adds on to your overhead costs.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and there's no point,
And
right?
it's a
So,
big
so,
cost, I
so, so
imagine.
think about if you send your car in to repair, if every single technician is highly competent, highly motivated, and highly articulate, most of the time it's not lah. So then you don't need a supervisor going in. Half the time it's because they are competent, they are not motivated,
Right.
or that's why you need a supervisor to tell them what to do, or they are competent, they are not articulate, so he or she pisses off the customer. So you need a smart, a more articulate supervisor come and talk to you, ask you about the problems, assure you that you bought the right car.
Yeah.
And so you see, but you think about it, that if we can get that one person to do the three person's job, you don't need the second and third person. And the second and third person do not add value.
Yeah.
It compensates for the failure of that first person, right? Yeah. So half the time is, if we focus on certain things well, hiring well, managing well, I think we don't need a lot of complexity in organizations. I think the complexity does not add value other than cost. And
yeah, I can see that. I mean, inflated roles, redundant roles.
And in organizational design, there was this situation many years ago where I've got an ex-staff come up to me and says, oh, there's this friend of mine in the Big Four. She got this consulting job and they did the work, they sent it to a client. It failed. The customer practically says, you guys are idiots. We do this. And then it landed on her friend's table and her friend was desperate. She has never done an org design before. So she asked me whether I could help. So we had lunch. Actually, at the end of the day, just look for three things, right? How information flows within. Org design is not about span or control. It's not about anything else other than getting three things right. How information flow within the organization. Who makes the decisions? When you draw an organization, where are the hubs for decision making?
Okay.
And who holds the resources required to deliver on those? The problem with a lot of organizations is this: when you draw that flow of information and the decision flow and the resource flow, you realize that they are the hub at very different places. The information collected by frontliners, the decision made by somebody who sits in the back office somewhere, we never seen a client. The resources is in, again, supply chain somewhere, right? So and you get a lot of inefficiency in this. So you want to make sure that when you design an organization, all this string flows through a single point at some point. And this point is the one who look at the information, make a decision, and divert the resources.
Okay.
But organizations
wouldn't that sometimes cause like bottlenecks
Sorry?
in an organization, where if you go to a certain point and if that person, whether he's overwhelmed.
So you have to make sure that the person is the right person. But the question is, it reduces the risk to one bottleneck instead of three, right? What if the same ineffective person sits on 3 points?
It won't even be bottlenecks, it'll be three stagnant.
Yeah, so
not
you end up
moving,
with
nothing happening.
You end up with low quality information, bad decisions, and no resources to implement on decisions. If you think about the ineffective person sitting there, right? So that's not all else being equal is that we assume everybody is effective, right? Then we design an organization like that. Then it's the second thing we do in finding the right people to fit in the right roles. That's the second exercise. Right? So if your design organization is wrong, whoever geniuses you put in there is not going to help. Because you're practically requiring 3 brains to operate on one single thing. It doesn't work that way, right? So I do think that sometimes we spend too much time, and I don't know what you call it. I just think that it's not very effective way of running organizations.
Well,
but it creates jobs lah. I mean, consultants.
I think there's suppose that's where the opportunity is as well, especially when you see MNCs, large companies, and there seems to be a lot of redundancies in roles or stuff like that.
There's nothing wrong if you know, again, like I said, you know that it is intentional redundancy. Right? So supposedly, let's think about, I heard about this story about a certain big conglomerate in this part of the world that has a department just to give jobs to the VIP's children. Because every VIP wants to have their children here, a royalty of VIP, and say, okay. And then the question is they cannot reject. So they put all these people there, and it's basically just a nice, enjoyable place for little people, for people to actually spend 1-2 years and get a resume, right? So if you're clear about that, great, then deal with it in that way. If you can then redeploy these people because they are smart or they are good, better still.
Okay.
But you are very clear that I'm investing $10 million in a department for VIP students. Fair. Right? What is problematic is you tell the world that I'm highly effective and we don't do this, and then you're actually doing this, right? Then you audit process, you look at it and say, hey, I mean, what the hell is this $10 million for, right? Yeah, I think that's...
So it's better to be... But
honest
how
with
would
yourself.
you own up to it? I mean, you can't own up to, hey, this is...
Internally, I mean, internally, let's be fair.
Okay,
So basically,
this
you can tell the outside world whatever you need to tell the outside world, but internally, you need to be very clear, and then people won't be complaining, right?
Right.
I won't be complaining, why is this guy not doing anything there? Oh, because he's in a VIP department now. Okay. Right. So
it's a very common department, this VIP department.
Not very common, but they are. Especially in countries with many royalties and powerful people. So in countries like this, it's very common to have the big companies would have some kind of a units like this.
Okay.
How big these units are, or how well camouflaged these units are, is a different story altogether.
Okay, interesting. So I learned something new today.
Yeah. So I think that is how it is. Things in organization, but again, like I said, with organizations, with life in general, I think it is. I don't think we should spend too much time worrying, complaining, whining about the things that are wrong and we can't do anything about.
Right.
So I mean, it's like saying the government is ineffective and you're not even a registered voter, right? So I mean, you can cry all you want about how effective your vote is, but at least you do what you can do, and then that's
actually. The thing I like to say is, because there was like a big movement before the last election about not voting, refrain from voting, and all that. And I think for me, it was just like, to vote or not to vote is your choice, like free choice. But if you don't vote, you can't complain about the outcome, right? If you voted, you didn't get what you want, I think you still have some legitimacy to complain and whatnot.
Exactly. And I have a much more extreme analogy. It's like hoping that you win the lottery, but you don't go and buy a ticket. Right?
Exactly. Okay, that's much better. It's so wishful thinking.
You can
this is a good example of wishful thinking.
The ticket chance of winning is 1 in 60 million, but you bought the ticket, but if you keep saying that, if only I win, but you don't go and buy a ticket, I think that is highly dysfunctional way to live your life.
Yeah. No, because even like now with our creative party hopping strategy and government switching and all that, like even in my community, this housing area, the WhatsApp group, suddenly when these things happen, it's just flooded with waste time voting. I queued up, why should we vote? What's the point of voting if you can just simply switch like this, right? And I think to a certain extent, you can understand the despair that you think you did this and got this and it turns out another way. But also don't give.
This also
you have
something
to stay action oriented.
I say something that hope or the loss of hope is horrible curse ever befalls you. So I think we live for hope. Whether the hope is for a better tomorrow, for a better retirement, for a better future for our children, whatever it is, we live for hope. And even when Malaysia was very successful, when I travel, I think first thing I find very intriguing is the energy and the passion in Indonesia, in Thailand, was always so much higher than us. Okay. We're a bunch of lethargic fellows, basically Malaysians. We're just a bunch of lethargic fellows. I mean, I don't like the government, but I'm just gonna sit in a kopitiam and talk about it, But there's nothing wrong about it in that sense. It's your life, you live. But I always feel that if, like you say, when you're hopeless and you despair, I think it's unlikely that you're gonna. I just think that's sad. I think it's just very sad. So, I think people die because they decided that tomorrow is going to be worse than yesterday, and therefore I decided to let go of everything. Go off. So I think that's how it is.
Yeah. And in that very somber and sad it's a terrible way to end the podcast. It's a terrible way to end the podcast, but let's try to flip it around. I think one of the key takeaways is get into entrepreneurship for the right reason. Try to get in some experience working, get some values in place. Don't chase valuation for the sake of valuation. try to have some business fundamentals.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to negate the the sad despair, hopelessness.
No, I think that if I summarize the ending, it's just that there are some things you can worry about. There are some things you can do about that.
Yeah.
Let us focus on things that we can do about.
Exactly.
I,
To be
I,
action oriented.
that's
Okay,
right,
yeah. I think that would be the key takeaway to,
Yes.
to always be action oriented. Kit, I've taken up more than the time that you agree. Thank you very much for doing this.
Yeah, most welcome.
And I have to say, Daniel, who was on the last previous podcast, suggested, or maybe I suggested, we do one together with him,
Sure.
and maybe some other friends of his, and he thinks it'd be, if you think you're harsh on startups, you should listen to Dan. And he says,
No, I agree with Daniel on some of this, and he's probably a qualified person to talk about it. So I think, and so are you, right? You have seen some of
in a
these
small
people.
way,
So
yes.
I think, I really think that half the people they are in startups for the wrong reason.
Okay, that'd be interesting. I look forward to doing that one. Thanks for doing this. Have a nice day.
Thank you.